If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. You're tired of a 24-day partial government shutdown? You say Trump and Republicans had an opportunity to get the border barrier funded in their first 2 years. They did. That's fair. But if you're tired of the 24-day partial shutdown, how tired you think the families of victims of persons in this country illegally are? For years and years and years, a federal government, both political parties, failing to address their first-order responsibility, the physical security of their constituents. Both parties take the rhetorical position that, of course, people in this country illegally who commit violent crimes should be removed. Of course. And yet, what steps have been taken to ensure that, as we have another high-profile case over the holidays, Ranil Singh, the police officer from California, murdered by a person in this country illegally? This is an exchange between Ted Cruz and Obama's ICE director, Sarah Saldana, from July of 2015. And you tell me what's changed in the intervening 3.5 years.
Ms. Saldana, I want to note that your testimony here, when I ask you how many criminals ICE released in 2013, you were off by a factor of 3. You said 30,000. The correct answer is 104,000. There were 68,000 criminals, criminally illegal aliens, that ICE declined to begin deportation proceedings against, despite the fact, as Senator Sessions observed, the federal law that you're holding up there says they shall be deported. The Obama administration refused to deport them. That's 68,000. In addition to that, there were 36,000 in deportation proceedings with criminal convictions that the Obama administration released. And I would note that among those were 193 murderers with homicide convictions, were 426 people with sexual assault convictions, were over 16,000 criminal illegal aliens with drunk driving convictions released by this administration because this administration refuses to follow the law. And
the party that was that administration continues. Nancy Pelosi was asked about that. Ranil Singh, in particular.
Oh, she was.
Briefing she gave on Friday to the assembled press corps. And here's her answer.
Would you say this to families who had lost relatives to heroin overdoses because obviously the drug 90% of the time came from Mexico? What would you say to families like that?
Well, what I would say to families like that is what I say to the president regularly. These are tragic situations. There's a tragic situation at the border. 2 little children died in the custody of the Border Patrol. But the plural of anecdote is not data. And as painful and horrible, one death is more than we should be able to bear, whether it's the corporal or whether it's the children.
Okay. The plural of anecdote is not data. So Nancy Pelosi's anecdotes matter. The 2 children who perished in CPB custody.
And actually, they did. I mean, one died at the hospital and whatever.
Right. Okay.
They were sick before they arrived in this country, and the sickness was exacerbated by the long journey. No one ever talks about that.
Her anecdotes matter of children who died but not at the hands of violent criminals or, as far as we know, negligent conduct by federal employees or medical professionals. Right. Those anecdotes matter. Ranil Singh dying at the hands of a person in this country illegally who murdered him, who killed him, shot him, that doesn't matter. Oh, and by the way, Nancy, you just heard data from Ted Cruz from 3.5 years ago. And we've got more data for you. It is wholly disingenuous, the position of the left on the score of human pain. The sentimental, barbaric position that the left is taking. And Sean Hannity, by the way, to his credit, he assembled family members of victims murdered, killed, whether manslaughter, a DUI, or first or second degree murder by persons in this country illegal. 9 family members represented on Hannity's program the other night. Listen to the rundown.
Wendy and DJ Corcoran. Their son Pierce, 22 years old, was just killed this past December 29th by a suspected illegal immigrant in Knoxville. He was driving on the wrong side of the road, wrong side of the highway. 22 years old. We're also joined by Laura Wilkinson. Her son Joshua was beaten and strangled and set aflame on fire by a classmate who was in this country illegally. Joshua was 18 years old. Then we have Steve Ronnebeck. His son Grant, he was raising money for college. He worked overnight in a convenience store, shot by an illegal immigrant robbing the store where Grant was working overnight, the midnight shift. Agnes Giboney is also with us. Her son, Ronald Da Silva, was shot in a driveway by an illegal immigrant gang member who had previously been deported. And let's introduce Michelle Root. Her daughter, Sarah, was killed by an illegal immigrant who was drunk driving, and he disappeared after posting bail. Why did he get bail? We're also joined by Mary Ann Mendoza. Her son, Police Sergeant Brandon Mendoza, was killed by a drunk driver in the country illegally, an immigrant in a head-on collision. Also with us, Maureen Maloney. Her son, Matthew. Denise was literally killed by an illegal alien who was drunk driving. And lastly, we introduce Sabine Durden. Her son, Dominic, was killed in a collision by an illegal immigrant who had 2 prior DUI convictions, and Dominic was a 911 dispatcher.
Not data. Not data. Those anecdotes don't matter. That's the Pelosi position. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Brian McCann. He's affiliated with Advocates for Victims of Illegal Alien Crime, AVIAC, and also a family member, his brother Denny, killed on the streets of Chicago by a person in this country illegally. Brian, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Dan and Amy. Glad to be here.
So some people are probably familiar with your brother's story, in part because we've talked about it in this show before. John Cass has written about it in the Tribune. But for those who aren't, please refresh or inform our understanding.
Sure. 2011, up in Logan Square, in the shadow of General Logan's statue up there, he was crossing Kedzie Avenue to call on a client who owned a Mexican restaurant. And they were good friends, and as he was crossing Kedzie Avenue, a drunk driver, prior convicted drunk driver from Mexico, hit him and dragged him a little over a block, and he died violently. The offender was apprehended by an off-duty cop, and he was arraigned, and we were assured by the state's attorneys that he would be prosecuted and serve 6-8 years in prison. When asked about his posting bond, they assured us that that would not happen because a federal detainer was issued, and he would not be allowed to. Well, what we didn't know at the time was that former Commissioner Garcia with his buddy Preckwinkle, President Preckwinkle, were in the process of hatching an ordinance in the council in the Cook County to pass an ordinance to make Cook County sanctuary. We weren't aware of that, nor was the prosecutor, by the way. And so 3-4 months later, his brother posted the $25,000 bond, and my brother's killer is alive and well in Mexico, and the FBI hasn't told me anything in the last 2 years, so I'm assuming he's still down there. They said he was driving a truck, and they know where he lived, but they, for some odd reason, couldn't get him extradited.
Do you know how he got to this country illegally?
No.
But you do know, and they know where he's living currently.
That's what he told me. Each major metropolitan area has a fugitive unit. So the head of the fugitive unit there told me that they know where he lives, and he's driving a truck. But there's some machinations between the State Department and getting them to act on extradition and serving warrants. I guess that's the big thing, getting them to actually serve the warrant. There was a warrant issued by the Mexican authorities, but they won't serve it. Now, why, I don't know. I prevailed on the Honorable Dick Durbin, and he assured me he'd look into it, and I never heard a thing from him.
Hold your breath.
So Brian, you were a teacher in Chicago, in both the CPS as well as private school. Lived on the South Side. What's your perspective on this discussion, both locally with the sanctuary city, county, state status, as well as what you see going on nationally?
Well, I of course want the federal government to pass legislation to prohibit sanctuary cities, and I've always supported what Trump and Sessions and others, Cruz have supported is to withhold funding. That seems to be the only real stick that would work. Now that's tied up in the courts right now, and my guess is it's going to wind up with the Supremes probably this session, and hopefully we'll win there now that we have a majority. The sanctuary issue is not at all being discussed of late because the wall seems to be the dominant, which I support all of the conservative positions on the wall too. But the sanctuary argument doesn't seem to be getting any.
Well, what do you say
right
to the
now.
federal workers who are upset that they haven't had a paycheck, but you realize why President Trump is doing?
I was talking to my wife this morning. I worked for the Department of Dependent Schools, 1987, and I took a year off from CPS, and I didn't get paid for 3 months. I was living in southwestern Germany, Karlsruhe, teaching Army brats, and I finally got my back pay. I had to borrow money from my now deceased brother to get through. But they'll get paid. I have no particular worries about their issue at all. I mean, they'll be taken care of. In fact, legislation was passed just the other day that was sure that they'll get back pay. So I have no particular worry about them.
How do you react to Nancy Pelosi's statement that stories like yours, two stories like yours, the plural of anecdote is not data?
Yeah, well, and she's the symbol of the enemy, and I'm not so sure beating up her or Schumer is works. The Hannity thing the other night was good. I knew virtually all of those people, and I've been with them in D.C. before. But I just wonder if this, and a couple of my people were slashing. One of them, Marianne, who used to be with us, she's no longer. I guess she confronted Pelosi, and Pelosi said she'd pray for her. I mean, I guess these are good human interest stories, but just beating up her. She's kind of a pathetic figure that needs to retire. I mean, she's a grandma. She should go back to her big villa in the valley in California and just go away. We've got to figure out a better way to go at this. I just don't know what the answers are. I see Lindsey Graham yesterday. He failed in his attempt to get Trump to do something, and somebody's got to broker this. I really don't know the answers.
Do you think maybe that because people react to stories, that's how they can maybe understand more complicated issues? Do you think like what Hannity did, elevating these stories of real people and real families, maybe that's a way to break the logjam?
Yeah, I don't want to be cynical, but I think we helped Hannity's ratings more than they helped the cause. I'm becoming very cynical about cable television, to be honest.
Okay.
I think I won't accept any invitations from them anymore. I've turned them down. They use us. It's a ratings game. Cable television, I think, is the ruin of America. I really do.
Well, I mean, it's generally hard to disagree with that. But I mean, so forget the venue. What about the idea of elevating your stories. I mean, that's what the left is doing. That's what Nancy Pelosi is doing. She makes reference to the 2 children who died, essentially in federal government custody. Those stories of real human stories, your family story, the others, they matter. So shouldn't they be amplified?
Absolutely. And Kristen, I always mispronounce her last name, the Secretary of Homeland
Nielsen,
Security. She's
yeah.
got excellent data that's been put in the paper. The general public, I think what probably needs to be done and isn't done is the news hour, public television, and the major CBS, ABC, NBC, the 6 o'clock news, 5:30 news, they're not reporting it very well. So the left gets Fox. We get Fox on the right. They get those other 2 stations on the left. And the public is really misinformed. I now live out here in the western suburbs. You walk up and down the street, people aren't clueless. They have no idea how serious the situation is. Mm. But they do know about the poor children on the border. They get that. We're just not messaging very well, and that's why I started this organization with some other people. We're trying, but it's just not working. I don't know. The general public has to get on board. It certainly worked in the Vietnam War.
Mm. Brian, where can people get more information about your organization, AVIAC, Advocates for Victims of Illegal Alien Crime?
The website is aviac.us. The website is up and running, and it's being reconstructed at the time. But you can, we've got our information on there and the biographies, and there's a button for donation too, because to help defray the costs when we go to Washington. And you can always read my book, Death in Chicago, a Sanctuary City. That'll give you a little more information on the specific dilemma that I went through in 2012 and 13, being lied to by county commissioners and others. If I can only take a moment as an aside, Denny was a big fan of Milton Friedman.
Oh,
he introduced me, who was a public sector worker, to Milton many years ago. Remember Milton had that TV series? I forgot.
Free to Choose, yes.
There you go. And then he was also a big fan of, who's the black economist?
Thomas Sowell.
Thomas Sowell. Denny, he was an insurance broker, so he and I used to have a lot of debates about public versus private sector. In the end, he won because I support the private sector more than ever.
There you go. Brian McCann, the website, aviac.us, the book.
Aviac.us, yeah.
Aviac.us, the book, Death in Chicago. Brian, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate
thanks so much, you guys.
Yeah.
All right, bye-bye.
And we
Take
think
care.
about you often, and your brother, too. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
I'm Lou Dobbs, corporate